Okay, so this is a books that I read in 2025 video. It's not going to be that many books compared to some of these other readers, but I do think they are a pretty good, a pretty worthwhile set of books. So these are the ones that I have in print. There's some that I've read as audiobooks, and some, and there's many more that I just didn't finish, that I gave up on. So I'll talk about all of them, but I guess I'll go in chronological order. I guess it starts with the Iliad. So I actually started this book last year in I think I first read a page of it in August of 2024. I gave up on it, and then I started again in November and gave up on it again. And then I may have started again in January of this year. Anyway, I ended up finishing this in May, and this isn't the version that I read. I think I read the Robert Fagel's translation, but I just recently picked up the Emily Wilson translation of both this and the Odyssey. So this is the one I have with me now. But the reason I started reading this book is because I wanted to start a reading list with the greater project of giving myself an education in the humanities. And so I found the Great Books reading list from St. John's College, and I decided to start chipping away at that. So anyway, I started with the Iliad. This tells the story of the Trojan War. This was written, I think, in the mid 8th century BC, but the actual events are supposed to have taken place a while before that, I think, in palatial Mycenae. So maybe, actually, I might be talking out of my ass, but I think that the contents of this book were supposed to have taken place in the late Bronze Age, before the Greek Dark Ages, I think. And then they kind of got back the ability to write and started recording myths and stories that supposedly had happened from that time period. That's my understanding. Anyway, I could be way off on that. But this tells the story of the Trojan War, and you're introduced to a lot of the heroes in Greek culture, as well as some of their values, which is why I think it's an important book to start reading in the Western canon. So some of those characters are like Achilles and Agamemnon, Patroclus, Hector, Paris, and King Priam. There's some other people like Nestor, Ajax, and there's so many names that in the beginning none of them mean anything to you, and by the end of the book most of them still don't mean anything to you. But as you continue reading through other books that we'll get into, they start kind of making more sense. And that's why I picked up this copy, is I want to reread the Iliad. Anyway, I started the year with this book. Okay. But I didn't, that was not the first book that I finished. The first book I finished this year was Notes from Underground by Dostoevsky. And that I read on my Kindle, so I don't actually have a physical copy of it. But it was the first Dostoevsky book that I've read in a long time. I think in 2023 I read White Nights, which I might have here, I don't know. Notes from Underground was pretty good. But yeah, when I read Dostoevsky, I'm not like floored like a lot of people may be. So maybe I just have to read more of him, or I just have to, I don't know. Maybe I don't have the context to appreciate him. But I thought it was good. A kind of a good picture into the plight of, I don't know, like an isolated basement dweller, kind of. And it was a short read, so yeah, that was the second book that I read, the first one that I finished of the year. Okay, the next book that I finished, I also read on audiobook, and I had started that in December of 2024, and it took me until May of this year to finish it. And that is A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. I kind of got bored with that book, I'll be honest. I know it's a really popular history book. Yeah, I think I just have trouble with audiobooks. I don't really focus well. Normally I was like trying to read it on like walks or something, and I would just keep getting distracted. But anyway, it did have its interesting moments. Bill Bryson kept using the word upshot, which I kind of got tired of, but I thought that was funny. I got pretty familiar with his style of writing through that. But yeah, just wanted to get a general idea of history. I like that, he starts with the cosmos and then gradually gets to human civilization. But yeah, okay. The next book was the Odyssey, and this is now me continuing through this reading list. So, Iliad, read first, and then you read the Odyssey. Yeah. This book was easier to get through than the Iliad because I had some groundwork for like Greek mythology and like the Greek world. So I already knew who Odysseus was. I was familiar with some of the gods that were mentioned, and it just read more like a story. I felt like the Iliad was just kind of describing battles for a lot of the book, which was hard to get through for me. But this, had a little bit more of a storyline, and it's actually a shorter book too. Yeah, so I read this shortly before the news that Christopher Nolan's next movie was going to be The Odyssey, so I'm super stoked about that movie coming out, and I'm definitely going to reread this before it does. But yeah, I don't know if I have any really worthwhile thoughts on the book. I think the first read is like just trying to stick with it and kind of understand generally what's going on, but I don't think I'll really have anything worthwhile to say until I read it again. In fact, I forgot most of the plot until I just reread like a Wikipedia summary. But I did think the moment with the dog at the end of the book was great. Like, that's a really cool moment, a cool like literary device to show the passage of time, and I'm excited to see that better be in the Nolan movie, because that was like one of my favorite parts of the book. Anyway, I read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I'm planning to reread both of these again next year. Okay, then I started reading Aeschylus, which is the next book in the lineup, and this is a library copy that I got in like August, and I still haven't returned, so I need to do that. But yeah, this is a compilation of 3 Greek plays: Agamemnon, the Libation Bearers, and Eumenides. I don't know how to pronounce it. So this kind of goes into the story of Agamemnon after the Trojan War, how he dies. Spoiler alert. But if you read the Odyssey, you already know he dies. And then the stuff that happens in his household afterwards, with Clytemnestra and the son Orestes, which I tried listening to some of this on the audiobook, and every time they said Orestes, I could not contain myself, because it just sounds like D's at the end. I don't know, but this was the collection of readings that I was going through when I started this YouTube channel, and I wanted to start retaining more of what I read, which I felt like I hadn't retained enough of Iliad and the Odyssey. So I started recording videos just talking about the readings from this, and it's helped a lot with my retention, just recounting or recapping what I'm reading. So that's this book holds a special place in my heart, because it was, it marks like the start of this channel. One second, I need to get a tissue here. Okay. So that is Aeschylus, the Orestia or Orestia, however you want to pronounce it. And that brings me to now, which is the Histories by Herodotus. This is the next book on the list for me, and eventually this book gets to the Persian Wars between Greece and Persia. But like the first half of the book is all just history and context before that. So it goes into like the history of Ionia, or I guess Lydia it was called, a certain part of it. I don't know. The geography is very confusing to me. It goes into the history of Egypt and like Egyptian customs. There's so much of that. So it's a while before you actually get to the good stuff, but everything is pretty worthwhile reading here. And I'm actually reading the Landmark edition, which is on my desk over there, but I also have this one. I prefer the Landmark because it has maps, but this is the Selincourt translation, and it reads pretty well too. So this is, I think, my favorite one so far, as tough as it is for me to get through. I started this in September, and it's like the end of December now. But I guess I just like history. I like learning about the origins of countries that we have now, and like societies and civilizations and how they formed. So this is like super worthwhile to read, and it's like the first history book that we have. And that's pretty much it. That's everything that I read. I took a lot of gaps, like this book alone, I sat down for like a month or two and stopped reading it. This one I did the same, the Odyssey the same. Like I've had a really hard time getting through these, but I think the first ones are the hardest, I hope. So Anyway, I'm looking forward to continuing the reading list next year. After the Histories, I think I'll be reading some Plutarch, like the lives of Lycurgus and Solon, and then I'll be getting into some Plato, I think Meno, and maybe then the Republic. But yeah, that's what I read this year, and yeah, I'm very glad that I read these. So that's it.